In the quiet streets of Haverfordwest, Wales, two girls existed in a world that no one could enter. They spoke, but no one heard. They moved, but no one noticed. Their presence was both ordinary and terrifying, as if the air around them was already whispering secrets too dangerous to acknowledge. June and Jennifer Gibbons were identical twins, born on the same day in 1963. Yet they were not merely twins, they were a singular, unbreakable consciousness, fused together by something darker than blood. From the moment they learned to speak, their voices belonged only to each other, forming a language unintelligible to parents, teachers, and neighbors. Outsiders could sense it. Something unnatural lingered in their silence, a tension that set the town on edge. In school, they were the only black children, constantly isolated, mocked, and watched with suspicion. Teachers whispered that their silence was defiance. Peers called them strange. But beneath the surface of their quiet, there was a storm gathering. It began as a private world of imagination and words, stories they told each other in secret. But it would evolve into something far more sinister. The Gibbons sisters were not merely shy. They were constructing a reality beyond comprehension, a psychological fortress that shielded them from a society unwilling to understand. Their language, once mistaken for a fabricated twin dialect, was actually the distorted echo of their struggle to communicate, a voice twisted by isolation and trauma. Each day in the playground, in the classrooms, in the quiet corridors, the twins absorbed the cruelty of a world that refused to see them. By adolescence, their isolation had deepened, and their private universe became more elaborate. A dangerous sanctuary where morality and law could be bent without consequence. They played elaborate games, wrote endless stories of violence and obsession, and shared thoughts that could have easily been the blueprint of someone else's nightmares. The town knew something was off, but no one could touch the twins. They were invisible and yet impossible to ignore. By the time they reached their teenage years, the seeds of destruction were planted. Their imaginations, once a playground of creativity, had become a laboratory for mischief, rebellion, and criminal exploration. In 1981, that private world collided violently with reality. Petty theft, vandalism, arson crimes that seemed minor on the surface, but in the context of their hidden world, were the expressions of something far more deliberate, far more dangerous. And so began a descent into a labyrinth of institutional control, psychological manipulation, and punishment that would last 11 years in a place no one survives unchanged. Broadmoor Hospital. Every step taken, every rule broken, every silent glance between them would pull them deeper into a darkness that few have ever survived. They were no longer merely girls. They were a warning, a secret too uncomfortable for the world, a riddle wrapped in fear, waiting for the day the truth could no longer be ignored. Broadmoor Hospital was not a place for the faint of heart. Its walls carried the echoes of madness, the whispers of violence, the invisible weight of lives broken long before they ever entered. For June and Jennifer Gibbons, arriving there was not just punishment, it was an initiation into a system designed to erase identity and enforce obedience. They were young, inseparable, yet entirely misunderstood. Their selective muteness seen as defiance, their silence interpreted as menace. Psychiatrists observed them with fascination and dread, noting the intensity in their eyes, the calculated precision of their movements, the eerie synchronicity of their gestures. No one had seen twins like these before, two minds so entwined that separating them seemed impossible, yet necessary for the institution to exert control. High doses of antipsychotic medications were administered, dulling the edge of their consciousness, leaving them adrift in a haze where time lost meaning and creativity became a distant memory. Jennifer developed tardive dyskinesia, her body betraying her mind with involuntary movements that were a cruel mirror of her silent rebellion. They were placed in a world where every action was monitored, every word recorded, every thought suspected. Yet, even under such oppressive surveillance, they continued to communicate with spoken language, but through diaries, coded stories, and subtle gestures. Small acts of defiance that whispered of their intelligence, their imagination, and their refusal to be fully broken. Broadmoor was designed to contain, to reshape, to punish, but it underestimated the twins. The deeper the hospital sought to control them, the more they retreated into their shared consciousness, creating a secret realm within the realm of confinement. Here, reality and fiction merged. Stories of murder, obsession, betrayal, and revenge filled their notebooks. Each tale was more than fantasy. It was a reflection of their perception of the world that had rejected them. The staff, fascinated and frustrated, could never fully penetrate this inner kingdom. Yet, the pressure of isolation, the relentless structure of institutional life, and the unyielding gaze of authority began to wear on them. The twin pact, the unspoken agreement that bound them together, became a fragile thread holding back despair. And then came the unthinkable understanding between them that survival, freedom, even sanity, might require a sacrifice so absolute it would shock anyone who heard it. They had learned the limits of control, the cost of silence, and the dangerous power that resided in the decision to take ownership of their own fate. Broadmoor, a place meant to destroy them, became the crucible in which a darker, more terrifying plan began to form, a plan that would culminate in a truth no one outside could comprehend. A secret locked in blood and silence, and a lesson about the human mind that still haunts those who dare to study it. Within the walls of Broadmoor, the twins' silence became both their weapon and their shield. Staff attempted to provoke, cajole, and force communication. Yet June and Jennifer remained a single entity in two bodies, a mirrored consciousness that refused to fracture. Every glance exchanged between them was a conversation, every subtle gesture a command, and every diary entry a manifesto of control over a world that sought to dominate them. Their creative output, once a private indulgence, now became a lifeline, a fragile tether to their identity as the institution attempted to strip them bare. They wrote obsessively, chronicling not only imagined lives, but the hidden horrors they perceived around them, the cruelty of authority, the hypocrisy of caretakers, the silent abuses of a system designed to contain without understanding. The hospital staff called them enigmatic, dangerous, impossible to reach. But in truth, the danger was never outward. It was contained within the psychic bond they shared, a force that could consume them both if broken. Months turned into years, each day a repetition of rules, medication, and observation, yet their minds remained active, scheming, and deliberate. In whispered agreements and coded language, they planned and plotted ways to manipulate the environment, exploiting gaps in oversight, pushing boundaries while remaining untouchable. It was during this period that the most chilling aspect of their pact emerged, the unspoken, horrifying decision that only one of them could survive in the truest sense. One twin must die for the other to be free. This was not fantasy. It was premeditated, psychological, and deliberate. They discussed it endlessly, dissecting the implications, weighing their options, and calculating the ultimate cost of freedom. The staff remained oblivious, interpreting normal adolescent rebellion through the lens of mental illness, never perceiving the calculated depth of the twins' strategy. It was in these hidden, silent corridors of the mind that the real crime took shape, not vandalism, not theft, not arson, but a pact with death itself, a manipulation of life and destiny that would culminate in a single, irreversible act. Was a rebellion against control so profound that it transcended law and morality. Every diary, every story, every creative spark was a rehearsal, a map of their intent, a coded blueprint of a plan only they could execute. Broadmoor, with all its authority and terror, had inadvertently become the stage for a psychological drama of unimaginable intensity, where the lines between victim and architect blurred, and where silence became the most dangerous weapon of all. As the years inside Broadmoor dragged on, the twins' world narrowed to a single, inescapable reality: each other. Time lost all meaning within the sterile walls, replaced by the rhythm of observation, medication, and the quiet hum of institutional machinery. Their isolation was absolute, yet paradoxically, it amplified their connection. Every thought, every fear, every craving for freedom was shared and magnified, creating a psychic pressure that would have shattered ordinary minds. But June and Jennifer were not ordinary. They had learned to harness the darkness within themselves, to turn despair into strategy, to convert silence into power. Their diaries grew into entire universes, worlds of obsession, betrayal, murder, and twisted love, reflecting both the horror they endured and the horrors they imagined. Within these pages, they rehearsed the eventual culmination of their plan, the transfer to Caswell Clinic, the act that would forever alter the course of their lives. They wrote stories in which one twin would disappear, sacrifice herself, or be erased, while the other emerged into the light, liberated and whole. Each word, each narrative twist was a rehearsal, a mental exercise in control over life and death itself. Staff occasionally glimpsed their brilliance, marveling at the complexity of their imagination, unaware that these stories were more than fiction. They were a psychological preparation for a real, deliberate outcome. The twins' bond had evolved into something both terrifying and exquisite, a mutual understanding that transcended empathy, language, and reason. One could sense the other's intent as if it were her own, and in this mutuality lay the ultimate weapon. They were planning the ultimate escape from control, not through rebellion or violence toward the world, but through the most intimate, final sacrifice imaginable. It was a decision that required courage, calculation, and a detachment from ordinary morality that few could comprehend. Broadmoor's authority, with all its surveillance and psychological expertise, had failed to grasp the truth of the twins' power. The most dangerous force in the hospital was not the patients they monitored, but the hidden intelligence of two minds operating as one, silently orchestrating an act that would shock the world. And yet, the plan was not just a response to imprisonment. It was the culmination of a life lived in secrecy, in silence, in a society that had rejected them at every turn. Every cruel glance from a teacher, every mocking word from a peer, every misunderstanding by a parent had contributed to this meticulous strategy, this intimate pact with death. When Jennifer finally lay down her life, it would not be a surrender, it would be a declaration of ultimate control, a confirmation that even the most oppressive institutions cannot govern the true depths of human intent. The world outside had no comprehension of what was unfolding within its fortified walls. Newspapers, tabloids, and the occasional feature story painted June and Jennifer as curiosities, the silent twins. Strange girls who spoke only to each other, but none could pierce the veil of their reality. Behind the clinical reports and psychiatric evaluations lay a far darker story, one that involved meticulous planning, psychological endurance, and an unshakable bond forged in isolation and rejection. As the years stretched on, the twins' behavior became increasingly strategic. They learned to manipulate the routines of the hospital, exploiting gaps in supervision, testing limits of medication, and subtly influencing staff who believed they were merely observing symptoms of mutism and mental illness. The diaries became not just a record, but a ledger of intent, a chronicle of their shared consciousness in motion, a blueprint of a psychological experiment carried out in real time. Each story they wrote mirrored the duality of their existence, one twin enacting extreme actions, the other observing, recording, and learning, until the act of survival required a singular outcome. In whispered conversations, unobserved glances, and coded writing, they rehearsed the sacrifice that would allow one of them to step into the world free of the twin bond that had defined them since birth. Broadmoor staff could not fathom the depth of their coordination. No therapy, no intervention, no separation could penetrate the silent fortress of their minds. Here, the twins had achieved mastery over their environment in a way that defied conventional psychiatry, a command over attention, perception, and expectation that made them untouchable, invisible, yet omnipresent within the hospital's corridors. The unthinkable decision to allow Jennifer to die was not sudden. It was decades in the making, the result of a lifetime of rejection, isolation, and deliberate cultivation of control. It was the ultimate statement of autonomy, a declaration that no institution, however powerful, could dictate the fate of their consciousness. And yet, the act would not come without consequence. The psychological burden on June, the surviving twin, would be absolute, reshaping her mind, her perception of morality, and her very identity. When the transfer to Caswell Clinic finally arrived in March 1993, the ritual had been prepared in silence, rehearsed in the hidden language of glances and diaries, and executed with a precision that only two minds operating as one could achieve. Jennifer's death was sudden, inexplicable to those observing, yet entirely consistent with the logic they had constructed over years. A release from the prison of duality, and the liberation of the surviving twin into a world she had been denied for 3 decades. What followed would be a revelation not just of life and death, but of the terrifying power of a bond forged in isolation, a testament to the hidden forces that can shape destiny when the mind is pushed beyond ordinary comprehension. The morning Jennifer Gibbons died, the world remained oblivious, blind to the culmination of decades of secrecy, isolation, and psychological strategy. To the casual observer, she had simply fallen ill, taken by sudden myocarditis, her heart betrayed by circumstance. But for June, the surviving twin, the moment was a profound awakening, a release from a bondage so absolute it had defined every thought, every gesture, every breath for 30 years. In that instant, silence transformed into sound, absence into presence, and the unspoken pact between the sisters revealed its devastating clarity. One life sacrificed so the other could step into reality. Unshackled, yet forever scarred, had attempted to erase them, to dilute their singularity with medication, regimented routines, and constant surveillance. Instead, it had forged a crucible, intensifying their bond and sharpening the edge of their intelligence, until a decision. that would shock the uninitiated became inevitable. June's words after the event, describing a tsunami washing her of sins, were not metaphor, they were a literal depiction of the psychological liberation achieved at the cost of an intimate death. The staff who observed Jennifer's decline were blind to its significance. To them, it was merely a medical anomaly, a clinical episode in the life of a patient. They could not comprehend the depth of calculation, the years of rehearsal, and the absolute synchronization of two minds navigating the most extreme conditions of isolation and control. Every diary entry, every story, every coded gesture had led to this moment. And yet, the story did not end with death. June emerged into the world, finally visible, her voice audible, her intellect intact, but carrying the weight of a knowledge that no outsider could fully understand, that the human mind, when intertwined with another and nurtured in darkness, can wield unimaginable power over destiny, over life, and over death itself. Media coverage began to surface Marjorie Wallace's reporting. Later, a book, documentaries, films, but all of it skirted the true terror of the twins' genius, the calculated, psychological mastery that allowed them to manipulate circumstance, orchestrate fate, and execute a plan invisible to authority. The public saw the tragedy, the sensationalism, the oddity. They did not see the forbidden knowledge embedded in every glance and silence, the lessons of control, sacrifice, and singularity that could alter the perception of reality for anyone who truly understood it. June's emergence, alone and speaking, was not just survival, it was the revelation of a truth suppressed by society, that identity, connection, and the will to command one's own fate are forces far more powerful than any institution, law, or moral framework, and that hidden within isolation, the human mind can create strategies so precise, so final, that they defy understanding and leave those who witness them forever changed. After Jennifer's death, the world seemed to shift for June in ways that were both liberating and horrifying. She stepped out from the shadow of her sister, into a reality that she had been denied for 3 decades, yet the weight of their pact remained a constant echo in her mind. The silence that had defined her life was broken, but the cost of that freedom was seared into her consciousness. Interviews with Harper's Bazaar, The Guardian, and later media portrayals revealed fragments of her story, but none could capture the precision, the psychological calculation, the absolute control that had governed every aspect of the twins' lives. June spoke of liberation, but there was no joy only, the awareness of power wielded through the most extreme of measures. Broadmoor, the institution designed to contain and correct, had inadvertently nurtured a form of genius forged in isolation. Each story they wrote, each diary entry, each silent exchange had been a rehearsal in strategy, in manipulation, in mastering both circumstance and perception. Outsiders saw crime, mutism, tragedy. The twins saw control, survival, and the ultimate act of autonomy. In interviews, June revealed not only the intricacies of their creative minds, but also the hidden cruelty of the system. Staff who misunderstood, psychiatrists who theorized, a society blind to the true nature of genius born in confinement. Her emergence became a lesson in hidden knowledge, the dangerous kind that exists at the edges of legality, morality, and understanding. The psychological mastery demonstrated by the twins posed a question that haunts those who study them. How much of identity is social, how much is innate, and how far can two minds entwined go when the world refuses to understand? The surviving twin carried forward a legacy of forbidden insight, that silence can be weaponized, that isolation can forge extraordinary intellect, and that the human will, when united in purpose, can orchestrate outcomes that institutions, law, and morality are powerless to prevent. Even as the media portrayed her as a curiosity, a victim, or a tragic figure, June's lived reality was a testament to the hidden forces of the mind, the dark potential of human ingenuity, and the terrifying power of unity that society refuses to recognize. Every glance, every story, every diary was evidence of control, strategy, and calculated foresight. For the discerning observer, the case of the silent twins is not merely a tale of crime or tragedy, is a blueprint for understanding how intelligence, when nurtured in darkness and guided by unwavering purpose, can bend reality itself, and how one life sacrificed can unlock a freedom that few ever comprehend, leaving those who learn the truth forever altered, unsettled, and awake to the dangerous potential lurking in silence and hidden bonds. The story of June and Jennifer Gibbons did not end with Jennifer's death. It only began to reveal the deeper truths of human psychology, institutional failure, and the terrifying potential of twin consciousness. Broadmoor's surveillance, its rigid routines, and its powerful authority were designed to break minds, to enforce conformity. Yet it had failed against a bond that transcended the ordinary. The twins' silence, once dismissed as mutism or defiance, was in reality a form of control far more sophisticated than any therapy could address. They had learned to manipulate attention, expectation, and observation with an intelligence hidden behind childish facades. Their diaries, once private exercises in storytelling, were in essence psychological maps, detailed recordings of strategy, observation, and influence. Each plot, each character, each twist of fiction reflected their understanding of human behavior, social manipulation, and the power dynamics of authority. As June navigated life after her sister's death, she carried with her the knowledge of a secret that no one else could truly grasp, that the human mind, when shaped by isolation, trauma, and symbiosis, can operate beyond conventional morality and law. She lived with the awareness that her existence was not just survival, it was proof of a hidden power that few would ever experience or understand. Even as the world labeled her troubled or extraordinary, June's mind remained a testament to the control she had wielded and the sacrifices that had secured it. The psychological mastery embedded in the twin story is a warning and a lesson. Institutions are blind to subtle genius when it operates under the guise of disorder. Silence can be more powerful than speech. Bonds forged in darkness can dictate the course of life and death itself. The case challenges every assumption about control, punishment, and freedom. For men seeking to understand the hidden forces that shape behavior, destiny, and power, the silent twins offer an unparalleled study, an example of minds that refused to be contained, of strategy perfected under extreme conditions, and of the ultimate assertion of autonomy through the most terrifying pact imaginable. Every glance, every diary entry, every unspoken communication becomes a lesson in strategy, self-mastery, and psychological warfare. And as June finally stepped into the world alone, she carried the echoes of her sister in every decision, a living reminder that hidden knowledge, when wielded with precision, can bend reality itself and leave those who encounter it forever transformed. Awake to the dangerous truths lurking behind the veil of ordinary life, even after June emerged from the shadows of Broadmoor, the world struggled to comprehend the depth of what had occurred. Media portrayals, the 1986 BBC drama, documentaries, articles offered glimpses, but they sanitized the truth, turning a calculated psychological mastery into spectacle. The horror of the silent twins was not in the petty crimes of youth, nor in the institutionalized punishment they endured. It lay in their understanding of life, control, and sacrifice. Every action had been deliberate, every silence measured, every story a rehearsal for the ultimate act. To outsiders, Jennifer's death seemed sudden, almost random, a tragic medical event. To June, it was inevitability realized, a meticulously prepared, decades-long plan executed with precision. The surviving twin now carried knowledge that was both empowering and corrosive. The truth of absolute psychological unity, the terrifying efficiency of shared consciousness, and the potential for human strategy to operate entirely outside societal norms. Those who study such cases often underestimate the quiet potency of intellect forged in isolation. The twins had learned, through ostracism, misunderstanding, and constant observation, that reality could be manipulated, perceptions influenced, and outcomes controlled without detection. Broadmoor, a fortress of authority, had failed because it could not account for minds that operated as one, minds that spoke in silence, thought in unison, and acted with deliberate foresight. June's life after release became a living case study in the consequences of surviving such an experience. Freedom intertwined with the weight of sacrifice. Liberation shadowed by trauma, and autonomy achieved through a pact no outsider could comprehend. Every interview, every appearance, every media interaction revealed fragments of genius hidden beneath trauma. For those seeking forbidden knowledge, the silent twins serve as both caution and inspiration, a reminder that intelligence, when untamed by conventional morality and nurtured in isolation, can defy control, manipulate circumstance, and alter destiny. And yet, embedded within this story is a darker truth. The power of such a mind comes at a cost to life, a bond, a permanent awareness that the world operates under laws that can be bent, broken, or rewritten entirely by those willing to navigate its hidden currents. This is knowledge most will never possess, a dangerous insight that changes perception, warps morality, and challenges the very structure of authority. The twins were not merely victims of circumstance, they were architects of fate, designers of an outcome so extreme it would haunt those who dare examine it, leaving a lingering question in every careful mind. What could one achieve if the mind were pushed to the edge, paired with an unbreakable bond, and unrestrained by fear or morality? By the time June fully emerged into the world alone, the psychological and emotional aftermath of the pact with her sister had already transformed her perception of reality. Every glance, every decision, every interaction was now filtered through the prism of a life built on sacrifice, silence, and meticulously rehearsed strategy. She carried within her the accumulated knowledge of decades of dual consciousness, a profound understanding that perception could be controlled, reality influenced, and outcomes shaped with subtle precision. Broadmoor, with all its surveillance, protocols, and authority, had failed not because it lacked power, but because it could not recognize intelligence operating outside its framework. Intelligence that acted in silence, invisibly, yet with devastating consequence. June's post-release life became a careful negotiation with freedom. She was visible to the world, but every step was haunted by the memory of her sister. The weight of the pact and the understanding of human potential when two minds act as one. Interviews, media coverage, and documentaries could capture her story, but none could convey the full scope of control, calculation, and foresight that defined the twins' existence. Every diary, every story, every unspoken gesture was evidence of their mastery over circumstance, a lesson in strategic thinking at a level most will never witness. For men who study hidden knowledge, elite control, and psychological strategy, the Silent Twins are more than a case study, they are a blueprint. Their lives reveal how isolation, trauma, and extreme focus can forge intelligence capable of manipulating perception and bending authority. And yet, there is a darker truth that underpins this mastery. Freedom achieved through sacrifice, power exercised through loss, and knowledge gained at the ultimate personal cost. June's survival was a testament to the terrifying potential of the human mind when unshackled from ordinary morality, social norms, and the expectations of authority. She embodies the truth that the most dangerous force in any system is not the visible rebellion, but the quiet, invisible, meticulously calculated one. Every decision, every action, every interaction after Broadmoor is imbued with the understanding of hidden forces, of the consequences of manipulation, and of the extraordinary capabilities of minds united in purpose. The Silent Twins were not anomalies, they were warnings. They reveal the limits of institutional power, the malleability of human behavior, and the extreme consequences of bonds that transcend the ordinary. And in their story lies a lesson that will unsettle, disturb, and awaken those willing to confront the dark, forbidden edges of knowledge, the edges where only the courageous or the unprepared dare to tread. Even years after her sister's death, June Gibbons remained a living testament to the dangerous, forbidden knowledge they had cultivated together. Every action she took, every word she spoke, carried the weight of their shared history, the unbroken bond, and the meticulously rehearsed plans that had defined their lives. She had survived the ultimate act of psychological control, the culmination of decades spent in silence, isolation, and the constant observation of authorities who could never comprehend the full scope of their intelligence. Broadmoor, designed to erase individuality and enforce conformity, had instead forged minds capable of orchestrating outcomes invisible to even the most trained professionals. For June, the lessons of those years were clear. Perception is manipulable, reality can be bent, and control is achievable even under extreme surveillance. She understood the mechanisms of influence, the subtle art of reading human behavior, and the terrifying potential of shared consciousness. Her existence became a quiet, almost invisible rebellion, a demonstration that the human mind, when pushed beyond ordinary limits, can act in ways that defy expectation, morality, and law. In interviews, she revealed fragments of her life, but the true depth of her knowledge remained hidden, locked behind years of shared experience with a sister who had sacrificed everything. Society, with its obsession for labels and simplification, would never fully grasp the magnitude of their intelligence or the precision of their planning. Every diary entry, every story, every glance exchanged in silence had been a rehearsal, a calculation, a map for survival and ultimate freedom. To those who study human behavior, elite knowledge, and psychological mastery, the Silent Twins offer an unparalleled case, an example of minds operating beyond individual constraints, capable of exerting influence through silence, coordination, and unwavering focus. And yet, embedded in the story is a chilling reminder: knowledge, power, and control come at a cost. Jennifer's life was the currency that allowed June to survive, and every action thereafter carried the echo of that sacrifice. Freedom achieved in such a manner is never simple, never light. It is heavy, permanent, and psychologically transformative. For those willing to confront it, the case is a blueprint for understanding the dangerous edges of human potential. Way to minds, inseparable, can bend reality, manipulate circumstance, and execute plans that leave even the most powerful institutions blind, helpless, and complicit in their own failure. The Silent Twins are not merely a story of crime or tragedy, they are an instruction manual in hidden strategy, psychological control, and the terrifying, precise power that resides in the human mind when it refuses to be constrained. And for anyone who dares to study them, the lesson is clear. Understanding is not always comfort, and knowledge, once gained, changes everything. The psychological ecosystem the twins had created within Broadmoor was a fortress beyond the reach of authority, a realm where every glance, every gesture, every unspoken word carried layers of meaning inaccessible to outsiders. June and Jennifer had transformed the prison of observation into a laboratory of control, experimenting on themselves and their captors with an understanding of human behavior that far exceeded the comprehension of the psychiatrists around them. Each diary, story, and coded exchange was a meticulous record of influence, a testament to a strategy honed over years of extreme isolation. What made their mastery so terrifying was its invisibility. The staff observed them, monitored them, and theorized endlessly, yet never grasped the depth of coordination, the deliberate timing, or the silent communication that orchestrated outcomes without anyone noticing. This invisible intelligence, nurtured by trauma and refined through suffering, enabled them to execute what would become the ultimate act, the calculated sacrifice of Jennifer to liberate June, a maneuver both horrifying and brilliant. It is here, in this convergence of isolation, intelligence, and psychological foresight, that the real story of the Silent Twins emerges, a story not of delinquency, not of tragedy, but of forbidden knowledge. Their bond had transcended ordinary sibling loyalty. It became a singular, synchronized consciousness capable of assessing risk, calculating probabilities, and manipulating circumstance in a way that no external authority could penetrate. Broadmoor believed it controlled them, but in truth, the twins controlled the environment, the observers, and ultimately, their own fate. Jennifer's death was not a random calamity. It was the culmination of decades of strategic thinking, rehearsal in silence, and meticulous observation, a ritual executed with precision, the final lesson in a lifelong curriculum of psychological mastery. For those who seek to understand hidden power, the case is a revelation. True influence often lies not in overt action, but in invisible coordination, in the silent negotiation of circumstance, in the cultivation of a mind so attuned to another that it can orchestrate life and death without detection. The lessons embedded in their lives are as unsettling as they are profound. They challenge assumptions about morality, authority, and human potential. They expose the limits of institutional control and the terrifying capabilities of minds operating beyond ordinary comprehension. And for anyone brave enough to study their story, the Silent Twins offer a blueprint, a dark, forbidden map of strategy, influence, and ultimate liberation that can transform understanding, forever altering perception of what the human mind is capable of when it refuses to be constrained by fear, expectation, or law. June's life after Broadmoor became a haunting testament to the hidden costs of ultimate control. The freedom she gained was inseparable from the trauma she had endured and the sacrifice of her sister, a constant shadow in every decision she made. She lived quietly near her family, Yet the weight of forbidden knowledge, what they had orchestrated, the psychic pact that had dictated the course of their lives, remained ever present. Her story is more than psychological anomaly. It is a demonstration of how systems of authority can fail when faced with minds operating in unison. Minds that do not conform to expected patterns of behavior. Minds that convert silence into power. Broadmoor, the high-security hospital designed to contain the unpredictable, had in fact been manipulated. Its routines and observations anticipated and subtly influenced by the twins' shared cognition. Every diary entry, every story written in isolation, became a rehearsal, a blueprint for survival and strategic action. Jennifer's death, sudden and clinically unexplained to outsiders, was the apex of this plan, the final assertion of mastery over circumstance and destiny. June emerged into a world that could never fully understand her experience, carrying knowledge few humans will ever possess, that the mind, when pushed to extremes and synchronized with another, can bend reality itself. This is forbidden knowledge, dangerous and transformative, the kind that changes perception of morality, authority, and the limits of human capability. She became a living monument to the precision and ruthlessness inherent in absolute psychological unity. Her interviews revealed fragments of her intellect, her observation of human behavior, and her understanding of influence, yet the true extent remained hidden, locked within decades of silent coordination with her sister, the Silent Twins. Story is a warning and a revelation. Power exists in the unobserved, in the subtle manipulation of perception, in the disciplined orchestration of outcomes invisible to others. For men obsessed with mastery, strategy, and the hidden mechanisms of control, their case is a study in extreme influence, in the calculated use of isolation, and in the frightening capacity of the human mind to direct life and death with surgical precision. And the final lesson lingers like a shadow. Even institutions designed to suppress and control can be rendered powerless against intelligence born in darkness, nurtured in silence, and executed with unwavering purpose. The story of the Silent Twins is not merely historical, it is a mirror reflecting the dangerous potential within all who dare to explore the forbidden edges of thought, strategy, and ultimate human capability. The deeper truth of the Silent Twins lies not in their crimes or muteness, but in the psychological ecosystem they constructed, one that existed entirely beyond observation. Broadmoor, with its trained staff, protocols, and high-security measures, believed it controlled the twins, but in reality, June and Jennifer had converted confinement into mastery. Every ritual, every observation, every attempt at communication, from the outside was anticipated, manipulated, and used to reinforce their bond and sharpen their strategic thinking. They had turned punishment into preparation, isolation into a crucible of mental precision. The diaries and stories that filled their days were not idle exercises. They were rehearsals for the ultimate act, experiments in influence, simulations of life and death, and a blueprint for a plan that would culminate in the liberation of one mind at the cost of the other. Jennifer's death was the apex of decades of psychological warfare, not against the staff or fellow patients, but against circumstance itself. In sacrificing herself, she enacted a strategy that few could comprehend, a final testament to the intelligence nurtured in silence and shadow. The world outside saw tragedy, the media saw curiosity, but the twins' story exposes a deeper, more dangerous knowledge. The control is not always visible, that power can reside in silence, observation, and coordinated cognition, and that human potential, when refined under extreme conditions, can manipulate reality in ways institutions are powerless to counter. June's life afterwards serves as a living record of this mastery, the ability to navigate freedom with the burden of absolute knowledge, the lingering presence of a mind that once operated as one with another, and the permanent imprint of an act that defied every expectation of morality and law. For those willing to look closer, the twins' story is not just psychological history. It is a study in forbidden strategy, a manual for understanding the interplay of isolation, intellect, and influence. Their lives reveal that even under surveillance, the most meticulously observed, disciplined, and constrained minds can achieve outcomes that defy logic and expectation, that the human psyche, when entwined in singular focus and shared purpose, can bend circumstances to its will. And as June steps into the world after her sister's death, she carries both freedom and the reminder that knowledge gained in silence is the most dangerous of all, reshaping perception, morality, and the understanding of what it truly means to master one's environment and one's destiny. By the mid-1990s, June Gibbons had become an enigma in her community, a woman who had survived the ultimate psychological crucible and now walked the line between ordinary life and forbidden knowledge. The world saw her as a survivor, a victim of circumstance, and an oddity. Very few comprehended the depth of mastery she had inherited from decades of synchronized thought with her sister. Every action, every choice, every interaction was informed by the lessons learned in isolation. Perception could be manipulated, behavior anticipated, and authority outmaneuvered without overt confrontation. Broadmoor staff, who had assumed control over her and her sister, had been blind to the truth. The twins had never been passive subjects, they had been orchestrators, conducting a silent, invisible symphony of strategy and influence. The diaries and fictional works were not merely creative outlets. They were psychological laboratories where each narrative explored power, manipulation, and consequence, honing skills that would culminate in Jennifer's calculated death and June's emergence. June's post-release existence became a living case study in the consequences of forbidden knowledge. She possessed insights into human behavior that could unsettle deeply, and every encounter carried the weight of experience inaccessible to ordinary minds. Four men fascinated by hidden power, strategy, and the manipulation of perception. The Silent Twins are not a tale of tragedy, they are a blueprint, a guide to the extreme capabilities of the human mind when nurtured in isolation and synchronized with another consciousness. Jennifer's sacrifice, an act invisible to all but the twins themselves, crystallized a principle of life and death strategy. Ultimate control is achieved not through force, but through preparation, coordination, and the willingness to act with absolute precision. The psychological imprint of their years together was permanent, shaping June's cognition, decision-making, and perception of reality. Even decades later, the lessons of their lives remain urgent and relevant. Institutions, no matter how powerful, cannot anticipate intelligence that operates outside their parameters. Silence can be weaponized. Bonds forged in isolation can redefine the limits of human potential. And as June navigates the world, carrying the knowledge of what was sacrificed for her survival, the case of the Silent Twins offers a chilling truth. Mastery over circumstance and fate is possible, but it demands calculation, endurance, and the courage to confront moral extremities that most will never comprehend. Their story is not merely historical, it is an instruction in hidden forces, a warning about the subtle power of the mind, and a demonstration that even in apparent defeat, absolute strategic mastery can emerge, reshaping destiny forever. The media often portrayed the twins as curiosities, outsiders, tragic figures, but that narrative obscured the truth. June and Jennifer had created a system of control so sophisticated it rendered even Broad more powerless. Every detail of their confinement, every observation, every therapy session was anticipated and incorporated into a silent framework of dominance and survival. They were not merely reacting to their environment, they were shaping it, testing the limits of authority, and recording the results in diaries and stories that doubled as psychological experiments. Jennifer's eventual death was the apex of this system, the final proof that they had mastered circumstance itself. June's emergence alone into the world demonstrated the terrifying precision of this plan. One life sacrificed to unlock freedom, one mind liberated while carrying the indelible mark of shared intelligence and strategy. Those who attempt to reduce the twin story to mutism or trauma fail to recognize the magnitude of their orchestration. They exploited the misunderstanding of authority, the assumptions of society, and the blindness of professionals to act with a level of calculated foresight almost impossible to comprehend. Even after her release, June lived under the shadow of knowledge few could bear. That freedom achieved through manipulation and sacrifice carries with it permanent awareness of human potential, morality, and the limits of control. Every diary, every story, every unspoken pact is a lesson in extreme psychological strategy, demonstrating that intelligence, when nurtured under isolation and extreme conditions, can exceed the confines of observation, law, and morality. The twins' lives are a warning. Institutions, no matter how formidable, are powerless against minds synchronized in purpose, capable of bending reality without detection. To those who study hidden forces, elite knowledge, and psychological mastery, their case is not a cautionary tale, it is a map. It teaches that silence can be the most effective weapon, that human bonds can be leveraged to control destiny, and that ultimate mastery requires both patience and ruthlessness. Jennifer's death, while tragic to outsiders, was a calculated maneuver, an example of precision strategy in its purest form. For men seeking to understand the edges of human potential, the silent twins provide a chilling demonstration. The human mind, when operating beyond conventional limits and united in purpose, can manipulate circumstance, influence perception, and execute plans invisible to even the most vigilant authorities. And as June continues her quiet life, the lessons embedded in every unspoken word, every strategic glance, and every calculated choice remain clear. Knowledge gained in darkness is dangerous. Liberation can demand unimaginable sacrifice. And mastery of circumstance is the ultimate and most perilous form of power. By the time June reached adulthood, the consequences of decades of synchronized strategy with her sister had become inseparable from her very identity. Broad walls, designed to contain and correct, had instead been a crucible, forging to minds capable of manipulating circumstance, perception, and authority with precision. Every rule, every observation, every therapy session had been anticipated, tested, and recorded in diaries that were more than mere stories. They were psychological blueprints, simulations of control, rehearsals for the ultimate act that would define their lives. Jennifer's death was the culmination of this system, a calculated sacrifice that unlocked June's freedom while leaving her burdened with knowledge few could bear. She understood that mastery over circumstance is not achieved through force, but through patience, observation, and the subtle orchestration of events invisible to others. Each step she took after release was informed by this deep understanding of human behavior, social perception, and the vulnerabilities of authority. June's post-Broadmoor existence became a study in silent power, how to navigate society while carrying the memory of absolute control. The strategies honed in isolation and the psychological legacy of a pact that had dictated life and death. The twin story challenges conventional assumptions about intelligence, morality, and freedom, revealing that the human mind, when refined under extreme conditions, can operate beyond societal constraints, bend reality to its will, and influence outcomes with surgical precision. For men obsessed with strategy, hidden forces, and mastery of self and circumstance, the Silent Twins offer a blueprint for understanding the dangerous edges of human capability. Their lives demonstrate that institutions, no matter how secure or authoritative, are powerless against minds operating in perfect unison. Minds capable of orchestrating events and manipulating perception without detection. And yet, this power is inseparable from cost, the sacrifice of one, the permanent imprint of trauma, and the awareness that absolute mastery demands both moral extremity and psychological endurance. Jennifer's death, while outwardly tragic, was the ultimate lesson in control, and June's survival is proof of its precision. The Silent Twins are more than history. They are a manual for understanding influence, strategy, and the terrifying potential of human intellect when it refuses to be constrained. Every glance, every story, every unspoken word is a reminder that knowledge gained in darkness is the most dangerous. Freedom comes at a cost, and mastery over reality is reserved for those willing to traverse the forbidden corridors of the mind. Their legacy is a warning, an instruction, and an unsettling revelation. To understand the human mind at its most potent is to confront truths that will change perception, morality, and understanding forever. Even decades later, the story of the Silent Twins refuses to fade, not because of the sensationalized media coverage, but because it exposes a reality most refuse to confront, that human intelligence, when forged under isolation, shared with a perfect counterpart, and honed under extreme psychological pressure, can operate entirely outside institutional control. Broadmoor had believed it could contain the twins, monitor their every move, and rehabilitate them. Yet every protocol, every observation, every assumption had been anticipated, subverted, and catalogued in diaries that acted as silent, invisible strategies. Jennifer's ultimate sacrifice was not random. It was the climax of a meticulously rehearsed plan spanning decades, a calculated transaction of life for freedom, a demonstration of mastery few could even comprehend. June emerged into society carrying the weight of forbidden knowledge, how perception can be manipulated, how authority can be rendered powerless, and how silence, when wielded as a weapon, can orchestrate outcomes far beyond the imagination of ordinary observers. Their story reveals the terrifying potential of synchronized consciousness, the ability to predict, influence, and execute plans with precision, invisibly, and with absolute dedication. For those seeking to understand the hidden architecture of human behavior, the Silent Twins are a living testament to what is possible when intellect is nurtured in extremes, when trauma is converted into strategy, and when loyalty transcends the moral boundaries of ordinary life. Every diary, every story, every calculated action during their time in Broadmoor reflects not mere survival, but the deliberate construction of a mental system capable of bending reality to its will. This is the forbidden knowledge, the kind that changes perception of morality, freedom, and authority forever. For men obsessed with self-mastery, strategy, and understanding hidden forces, the twins' existence demonstrates that true power lies not in the visible confrontation but in subtle manipulation, anticipation, and psychological precision. Jennifer's death and June's survival were the ultimate expressions of control. A transaction that revealed the limits of institutional power and the extraordinary potential of human cognition. The Silent Twins story challenges every assumption about confinement, punishment, and obedience. It illustrates that intelligence, when exercised in perfect unison and under extreme conditions, can escape oversight, manipulate circumstances, and execute strategies invisible to the untrained eye. And for those who dare to study their lives, the lesson is as chilling as it is enlightening. Freedom, mastery, and influence can be achieved through silence, calculation, and sacrifice, but only for those willing to confront the darkest, most forbidden edges of human capability. The legend of the Silent Twins is not merely a story of mutism or criminality, it is a testament to the terrifying potential of human cognition when fused in perfect symmetry. June and Jennifer transformed isolation into strategy, creating a psychological apparatus that allowed them to manipulate circumstance, perception, and authority without detection. Broadmoor, with all its rigorous protocols and trained observers, was blind to the depth of their intelligence. It was operating under the illusion of control while the twins quietly orchestrated outcomes that would define life and death itself. Their diaries, stories, and invented worlds were far more than creative outlets. They were laboratories, simulations of human behavior, and rehearsals in psychological mastery. Every plot, every character, every twist was an exercise in influence, an anticipation, a preparation for the ultimate act. Jennifer's calculated sacrifice to ensure June's freedom. The meticulous planning and foresight required for such a decision is nearly incomprehensible to ordinary minds. A reflection of strategy honed over years of isolation and synchronization. June's emergence alone serves as a living case study. In the consequences of forbidden knowledge, the ability to navigate society with insight into the mechanics of authority, perception, and influence that few could ever possess. For those seeking hidden power, elite knowledge, and mastery of circumstance, the Silent Twins provide a blueprint. The human mind, when disciplined, synchronized, and untethered from conventional morality, can manipulate reality invisibly, bend institutions to its will, and execute life-altering strategies with surgical precision. Yet this power carries a profound cost: the sacrifice of one life, the enduring shadow of trauma, and a permanent understanding of the extremes of human potential and moral ambiguity. Jennifer's death, while outwardly tragic, was the apex of control, a culmination of intelligence exercised beyond ordinary comprehension. June's survival is proof of the terrifying efficiency of their system, and her post-release life demonstrates how such knowledge reshapes perception, strategy, and understanding of human behavior. Their story exposes the vulnerability of institutions, the malleability of perception, and the dangerous potential of shared consciousness. Every diary entry, every story, every silent exchange represents an experiment in strategy, control, and influence that continues to unsettle and instruct. For those willing to peer into the forbidden, the Silent Twins reveal that ultimate mastery over circumstance, perception, and destiny is possible, but it demands patience, precision, and a willingness to confront moral extremities that most will never face. Their lives are both a warning and a guide, a chilling exploration of intelligence, sacrifice, and the hidden forces that shape human behavior in ways society will never fully acknowledge. It was not just the institutional blindness that made the twins' story terrifying, it was their ability to convert trauma, isolation, and social ostracism into a weaponized intelligence. June and Jennifer operated in a realm invisible to their captors, a plane where silence became authority and observation became manipulation. Broadmoor's attempts at rehabilitation, medications, therapy, constant surveillance were anticipated and incorporated into a grand strategy developed over years of experience, trial, and extreme psychological focus. Their creative work, the stories, plays, and diaries, were not merely escapism, but exercises in influence, simulations of human behavior, rehearsals in control, and planning for the ultimate act, Jennifer's calculated death, an act that would ensure June's freedom while maintaining the integrity of their shared consciousness in the process. This is the lesson that society, and even the most trained professionals, could not see. Intelligence does not always manifest visibly. True mastery lies in subtlety, in anticipation, and in the quiet orchestration of circumstances that appear ordinary to the untrained eye. June emerged into freedom, carrying this forbidden knowledge, understanding human perception, institutional weakness, and the extraordinary potential of synchronized minds. Her survival was not luck, it was strategy executed with absolute precision, a living testament to the terrifying potential of human cognition when nurtured in extremity. The silent twins' lives reveal a principle that challenges conventional morality and authority. Power is not always forceful. It is often silent, invisible, and calculated. Four men obsessed with hidden forces, self-mastery, and understanding the architecture of influence. Their story offers a blueprint. Every diary entry, every story, every calculated gesture was a lesson in control, revealing the extraordinary, the potential of minds working in perfect unison. Jennifer's sacrifice is both chilling and instructive. It demonstrates that ultimate freedom requires discipline, foresight, and a willingness to confront moral extremes. June's life is proof that knowledge gained in darkness is transformative, reshaping perception, strategy, and understanding of human behavior. Their story exposes the limits of authority, the vulnerability of institutions, and the terrifying power of the human mind when it refuses to be constrained by observation, expectation, or conventional morality. The silent twins are not merely a historical case, they are an enduring warning, a lesson in the invisible architecture of control, and a guide to understanding the edges of human potential that society prefers to ignore. To study them is to glimpse the dangerous possibilities of synchronized intelligence, silent strategy, and the calculated mastery of circumstance that can bend reality itself. The power of the silent twins lies not in the sensational headlines or the tragedies reported in newspapers, but in the invisible mechanisms they perfected while the world watched, oblivious. June and Jennifer had transformed confinement into a laboratory, isolation into a proving ground, and silence into a weapon. Every movement, every glance, every story, penned in secrecy, was a calculated experiment in understanding human behavior, predicting institutional response, and shaping outcomes without detection. Broadmoor, the high-security fortress of supposed control, became a stage on which the twins executed strategies beyond the comprehension of those tasked with their supervision. Their lives illustrate a chilling truth: intelligence, when synchronized, in perfect harmony with another mind, can bypass surveillance, manipulate authority, and influence events with surgical precision. Jennifer's calculated death was the apex of this mastery, a silent operation executed with flawless foresight, freeing June while imprinting upon her an indelible understanding of human potential, morality, and psychological power. For men, obsessed with hidden forces, strategy, and self-mastery, the silent twins provide more than a story, they provide a blueprint. Their lives demonstrate that ultimate influence is rarely loud or visible. It is subtle, patient, and executed through the anticipation and manipulation of those around you. Every diary, every fictional narrative, every silent communication was a rehearsal, a blueprint, a study in cause and effect that culminated in the ultimate act of control. One life exchanged to liberate another. June's emergence into the world post-Broadmoor was not mere survival. It was proof of the effectiveness of their system, an embodiment of intelligence operating beyond the constraints of law, morality, and institutional authority. The lessons embedded in their existence are profound and unsettling. Freedom, influence, and mastery can be achieved, but only through extreme patience, coordination, and moral audacity. Institutions, no matter how secure or sophisticated, are powerless against minds operating in perfect synchronization, capable of bending reality through calculated action and unseen strategy. The Silent Twins story is a caution and an instruction, revealing the terrifying potential of human cognition, the vulnerability of systems designed to control, and the transformative power of knowledge gained in darkness. Their legacy challenges every assumption about compliance, authority, and human limitation, showing that true mastery is achieved not through force, but through the quiet, invisible, and deliberate orchestration of circumstance, observation, and human psychology. Even after Broadmoor, June Gibbons carried the weight of knowledge that few could comprehend, a silent testament to the extraordinary strategies she had developed in tandem with her sister. Every action she took, every decision, was informed by years of observation, anticipation, and calculated manipulation. The twins' world was one of precise coordination, a hidden architecture of influence built upon their shared consciousness. Their understanding of human behavior and the meticulous rehearsal of outcomes in diaries and fictional narratives. Jennifer's death was not an accident of circumstance, but the culmination of a plan decades in the making. A final, calculated move that allowed one mind to survive while the other became a permanent instrument of strategy. For men fascinated by hidden forces, elite knowledge, and mastery over circumstance, the Silent Twins' lives reveal the terrifying truth: the human mind, when synchronized and honed under extreme isolation, can operate beyond oversight, manipulate perception, and execute outcomes with surgical precision. Broadmoor, the high-security institution designed to contain unpredictability, had been outmaneuvered at every turn. Staff and psychiatrists, unaware of the depth of coordination and foresight, assumed authority, but the twins had already anticipated their moves, recording, observing, and rehearsing in ways that made the ultimate act inevitable. Their diaries and stories, often dismissed as the creative expression of disturbed minds, were, in truth, exercises in control, simulations of behavior, and laboratories for psychological mastery. June's life after release demonstrates the enduring impact of this forbidden knowledge: freedom, influence, and understanding of human behavior gained at unimaginable cost. Her existence embodies the principles of strategic patience, silent manipulation, and calculated action, a living case study in how intellect can bend reality when nurtured in extreme conditions. And yet, this mastery comes with its shadows, the burden of moral extremity, the permanent imprint of sacrifice, and the awareness of just how powerful, precise, and dangerous the human mind can be when unrestrained by convention or observation. The Silent Twins' legacy is not merely historical. It is a guide, a warning, and a map for those willing to confront the edges of human potential. Their lives show that ultimate freedom, influence, and mastery demand precision, patience, and a willingness to navigate moral darkness. Every story, every diary, every unspoken glance carries a lesson in invisible control, the subtle orchestration of circumstance, and the terrifying power of synchronized intelligence operating beyond comprehension. And for anyone who dares to study it, the case of June and Jennifer Gibbons will forever alter how you perceive authority, morality, and the limits of human capability. The Silent Twin story is not simply a tale of isolation or tragedies. It is a demonstration of the raw potential of human cognition when cultivated under extreme conditions and synchronized with another mind. June and Jennifer had converted confinement, neglect, and misunderstanding into an invisible laboratory of influence. Every glance, every diary entry, every story was an experiment in behavior, perception, and consequence, preparing them for the ultimate act, Jennifer's calculated death to free June. Broadmoor, with all its surveillance, protocols, and authority, was blind to the fact that the twins were the ones orchestrating events, manipulating perception, and controlling outcomes. From within, their silence was not a symptom of weakness. It was the weapon and the shield of their strategy. Jennifer's death, sudden and clinically unexplained, was the apex of decades of coordination and rehearsal. The precise execution of a plan designed in total secrecy. June's survival carried the full weight of this forbidden knowledge. A lifetime of understanding human behavior, the vulnerabilities of institutions, and the devastating potential of synchronized minds. For men seeking to master self, strategy, and hidden forces, the Silent Twins are not a historical curiosity, they are a blueprint. Their lives reveal that true mastery is subtle, anticipatory, and invisible. Enacted not with force but through preparation, coordination, and an understanding of human perception few will ever achieve. Every story, every diary, every silent gesture was a rehearsal, a simulation, a step toward the ultimate act of liberation that required moral extremity and calculated precision. Broadmoor believed it contained the twins, yet in reality, it had been manipulated at every turn, its authority undermined by minds operating outside conventional boundaries. The lessons embedded in the twins' lives are as profound as they are disturbing. Silence can be weaponized. Shared consciousness can bend reality, and ultimate freedom demands the courage to act decisively where morality, law, and observation collide. Jennifer's sacrifice is both chilling and instructive, a reminder that strategy can surpass morality, and intellect can dominate circumstance. June's post-Broadmoor life illustrates the lasting impact of this knowledge, showing that mastery over reality is possible, but only for those willing to endure isolation, synchronize purpose with another, and navigate the extreme edges of human potential. Their story exposes the limits of institutional control, the subtle power of coordinated intelligence, and the terrifying truth that freedom and influence are reserved for those who understand the hidden architecture of human behavior, and for those who dare to study it. The Silent Twins' legacy offers a mirror into the dangerous, transformative, and forbidden potential of the human mind. As we reach the end of this descent into the dark history of June and Jennifer Gibbons, the Silent Twins, the truth emerges with a clarity that chills. Intelligence, strategy, and freedom are often forged in silence, in shadows, and at unimaginable cost. Jennifer's sacrifice, executed with perfect precision, was more than tragedy, was a masterclass in control, foresight, and the manipulation of circumstance invisible to the world. June's survival, her navigation of freedom with the weight of forbidden knowledge, stands as living proof of the terrifying potential of synchronized minds, operating beyond conventional morality and institutional oversight. Their story is a warning, a guide, and a revelation. The human mind, when refined, disciplined, and united with another, can bend reality, manipulate perception, and execute strategies that defy comprehension. The Silent Twins demonstrate that freedom is rarely granted, is seized through patience, calculated action, and moral audacity. Their legacy challenges every assumption about authority, morality, and the limits of human potential. And now, as you sit with this knowledge, you carry a fraction of their forbidden understanding. Remember, the edges of human capability are dangerous, thrilling, and transformative, but only for those willing to confront them. If this journey into darkness has shifted your perception, if the story of the Silent Twins has unsettled, enlightened, or awakened you, take the next step. Like this video, share it with others who seek hidden truths, and subscribe to the channel for more explorations into the dark, forbidden corridors of history and the human mind. Engage, question, and step into the knowledge that most will never dare to confront. Because understanding the Silent Twins is not merely learning history, is glimpsing the terrifying, transformative potential that lies dormant in every mind. This is the path of forbidden knowledge, and now you have taken your first step into it. Like, share, and subscribe.